Liberal Currents presents Half the Answer with your hosts, Caitlin M. Green and Trent R. Nelson.
Happy days are here again, and as we all know, as we've all discussed, as we've all very clearly defined and outlined in our mission statement, knowing the question is half the answer. Everyone's saying it. It's the phrase on everybody's lips, and here we are yet again. I am Caitlin Green. I'm your host, along with Trent Nelson. We are, of course, editors at Liberal Currents. I'm a linguist, a discourse analyst. I'm a social media on too mucher type person, and and periodically I'll put all those feelings that I developed on the social media and in my real life into an article or two. So that's my deal. Trent, of course, a philosopher, historian, man about town, hat-wearing guy. Yep. And Trent, who did you bring today?
Well, you bring so many wonderful folks each and every week that I started to feel upstaged, not going to lie. So what I did was found a wonderful individual named Joshua Erlich, and he is a civil rights lawyer. And, well, we figured we would talk today about civil liberties, how some people, the 47th President's administration, well, they don't think we need them anymore, but methinks Josh has a different viewpoint, as do many of us. Good morning, sir. How are you today?
Morning. It's great to be here.
The pleasure is all ours, sir. And, of course, civil liberties, civil rights, these are important things, but we need to know more about you before we get into this. How do we know who we're talking to if we don't know you, sir? Well, what brought Josh Erlich here? What brought him to this moment in time? What made him want to fight for civil liberties and civil rights of all people?
Sure. I'm a civil rights attorney. I've been doing that role for 13, 14 years now. I did some class action work before that. And most of my work is in employment, but a lot of it is in civil rights. Probably 10 or 11 years now we've been doing police misconduct cases, prison conditions cases, things like that. And I don't know, we do it because we think it's important, but this law is very tough, and I'm sure y'all know about qualified immunity and things like that. I'm sure we'll touch on things, but the law is very much stacked against not just plaintiffs in general, but civil rights plaintiffs specifically. Extra burdens on civil rights plaintiffs that you don't find elsewhere. So it's.
But I'm sure, like, in our new era of sort of freedom and eagle screech awesomeness, like, that's all gone away, right? Like, it's super easy now to, like, be the home of the free.
It is. Yes, the free speech stuff is mostly a scam. That's basically where I am on it. So
yeah. That's a nice callback to our first ever episode, which was called Campus Misinformation, which touched on, like, free speech, First Amendment hardball, and, like, the kind of ways that people will talk about loving free speech and loving freedom while actively eroding the freedoms of the people that they come in contact with.
This is sort of relevant to the whole topic, so I'll say it up top. But one of my big frustrations with these things is that civil liberties are by nature a balance. Right, and the idea that free speech, for example, right, is the be-all and end-all, just ignores that there's a balancing of the equities to do, right? Yeah. So, we've seen this a lot in trans rights, especially in Virginia, that I know best, right? The governor a few years ago issued some guidance. Glenn Youngkin issued some guidance, that was all about parents' rights, for example, and the parents' rights to not have their child called something that they don't know them to be at school, or using different pronouns. But all of that requires you to ignore the other side of those rights. And it's the same thing with the free speech issue, right? All the time. It's everybody, when you say this person has an absolute right to free speech, you are affecting other people's civil liberties at the same time to their detriment. And you're just ignoring that side of the equation. And it's pervasive through this stuff.
Well, I'll say those of us who have read Talia Lavin's book, Wild Faith, we know all about the parental rights, the parents' rights movement, and how it comes from the desire to be allowed to do all kinds of absurd stuff in your own home to your own children,
Right.
including abuse, right? So we know that this framing of rights obscures that balance of the right of the parent to control what happens under their roof versus the right of the child to be safe and
Right.
healthy.
We might
Right.
we might properly call it the tyranny of the parent.
Right.
Is what they desire,
Oh
and
yeah.
of course, what happens to the civil liberties of the children? And yet, in this
Yeah.
ideology, as Caitlin and I think have spoken about before, Josh, we'd love for you to jump in about it. They're not really conceived of being beings that need or have civil liberties in the same way that an adult might be. Which of course is challenging because they turn into adults that start screaming about it. So funny how that transition occurs. So Josh, you are based in Virginia, is that correct?
Yeah, we're based in Virginia, and we work all over the place, mostly Virginia and DC, but we work all over.
So what are some of the and I use this term in the traditional sense of the word. What sort of innovations have you seen in your world since the 47th president decided that he was coming back? What sort of things has Virginia been dealing with, perhaps on a greater level than before?
So, Virginia hasn't really had issues separate from what everybody else is having. Back in 2020, 2022, and through that stretch, Loudoun County in Virginia was very much the sort of epicenter of a lot of the parents' rights and anti-trans. Uh, the videos you saw of people shouting at council meetings and things like that, there was a lot of Loudoun County and all of that, and that's
Yeah.
folks that don't know, that's a sort of ex-urban county to DC, a couple of hours out from DC. Um, and, definitely the sort of point as you go out to DC that gets to be more of a clear swing district area than closer to DC. So that was the sort of epicenter of those things. And so a lot of that was very active here. But by and large, University of Virginia has had some of the same issues as Columbia and Harvard and whatnot. And we certainly have a Republican governor that does not help things, a Republican attorney general who doesn't help things. But our issues here have been pretty consistent with that. Everybody has issues everywhere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. You want to talk about Columbia for a sec? Because there have been some developments. Yeah. Okay. A little peek behind the curtain. We're recording this on the day that it came out that Columbia University is going to pay $200 million to the Trump administration in a settlement. And the reason is nominally, right, that they failed to protect students from anti-Semitism, because there were protests at Columbia. And, I've covered elsewhere that the types of things that happened at Columbia, even the really like the occupation of the library and all that stuff, those are not unprecedented in Columbia's history. It's like kind of a tradition to do that stuff. Right. So the biggest, most famous example is the protest of the investment in South African apartheid, where the same library was occupied and things arguably got more out of hand, actually. And I think, it really puts the lie to it when you look at what Linda McMahon was saying on the TV this morning. Was it this morning that she said this? Hang on, I'm going to find it.
I
Since
saw it.
it, yeah, I just oh yeah. Okay, Linda McMahon, yeah, just a few hours ago on Fox, she's like, "Oh yeah, this is a monumental victory for conservatives who wanted to do things on these elite campuses for a long time because we had such far left-leaning professors." So like, on in their little press releases, they're like, "This is about Jewish students and protecting Jewish students." Never mind that there's like a lot of Jewish students that were participating in those protests, and that classes largely went on. um, but actually, if you just ask her to look down the barrel of a camera and explain, she's like, "Oh yeah, I'm so excited because of all the leftism," right? we're going to root it out.
On some level, it's disappointing because it's just also boring. It's the there is a strain of anti-intellectualism on the right, goes back however long, 100 years, 200 years, whatever it is, whatever the pretext is that they're putting forward, it's just a pretext. They, um, by and large, especially the more authoritarian strains of the right,
Mhm.
they don't like people being educated. They don't like people knowing their rights. And these schools that have capitulated are just you know granting a level of credulity to things that
Yeah.
are plainly not true, like
Right.
obviously.
Yeah.
Right.
So I had an experience in 2022 that I will never shut up about. It was the most annoying weekend of my life. It was when I virtually attended the conference on academic freedom at Stanford University, in which a bunch of people talked about what were the greatest threats to academic freedom. And I marked them down and I made a little chart and everything. And the largest number of perpetrators, in their opinion, was Marxism, leftist professors, and student protests.
Right.
And I had to listen to this. I think he was an emeritus professor, John Ellis from Santa Cruz, say this: left radicalism has really been making enormous progress by using the campuses, but that is exactly what the radicals promised us back in the 60s with their cultural statement. They admitted then that in America, they could never succeed at the ballot box, and so intended to seize control of the universities and use them to promote their ideology. And then he called universities a boot camp for radical activists, right? The same attitude is being packaged for essentially every audience, that the
Right.
far right is talking like this, but also the sort of intellectual elites, right? These professors that are supposed to be more kind of above it all and more polished, and they make it sound like you could buy it even if you're a liberal. And that's when I get really mad, right? Because I had to sit there and listen to it, basically.
And but the part of that is that needs to be highlighted, right? Is that it is just delusion, like it's
Mhm.
Right.
nothing at all except delusion, right?
It is simply a conspiracy theory.
Yeah.
And not just a conspiracy theory in the way that most conspiracy theories are by people on the outside saying that they can't get in. This is someone who's on campus.
He's on top.
You're there. You know that the thing you're describing simply is not happening. It is
Yeah.
personal victimization, and because people don't agree with you or something.
Right.
Yeah.
Right? But
Well, yeah.
you're on campus. I don't know what to say.
Right. You can see. Well, I think that, yeah, there's probably a skewing of perception for them, right? Because they are so comfy and so used to sort of adulation that kind of the
Right.
worst thing they can think of is a loss of esteem, and people disapproving of them. And so for them, that's like Armageddon. We have to panic about it. I'm in
Right.
danger. Right. And it's like, I'm sorry that not all of your students were nodding vigorously along for all of your lectures. I don't know how to legislate that, in a way that they're required to do so. But maybe Linda McMahon has ideas.
There's another thing about that is, and I think you said that conference was back in 2020.
2022. Yeah.
Right? Throughout this whole period until we've gotten to this current crisis, this whether it's that or the Oberlin nonsense or any of these sort of panics, right? It has all happened at the same time that certain state university systems have been having the actual horrors beset upon them, right?
Yeah.
Right.
I went to LSU for my undergrad. Over the past, I don't pay a ton of close attention to this anymore, but 10 or 15 years, back to the Jindal administration, they've been undermining governance there. They've been canceling programs. I don't even know if I could get my degree there anymore. It's and those things, they're horrors in themselves. But all of this talk of cancel culture and free speech has happened at the same time as those things,
Mhm.
and those
Right.
things just got no attention because it's not what certain people want to talk about.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, we've been putting together a book list, an LC book list, and you mentioned anti-intellectualism, and I would be remiss if I did not mention Richard Hofstadter's wonderful work, Anti-Intellectualism in America and Society. And certainly it is important because he goes all the way back 500 years to like people complaining about smart people, complaining about innovation, complaining about changes in how we're thinking of things and perceiving things. And as you noted, sir, it's gone down the line all the way to modern times. But all of this talk of civil liberties, well, it reminds one of the hosts of this program that, well,
Which
there are
one,
many
Trent?
people.
Which one? Which host?
We'll have to see in a second. That there has been civil liberty attacks on nearly everybody. Unless you look old and white and pasty, like the president, you are likely affected, and even perhaps so. So, Josh, I mean, where to begin? There has been a lot about transgender people. I heard a lot of people talking to me before the election that transgender people actually were going to be fine. They were not going to be targeted. No one was going to do anything to them. Turns out that was incorrect. Um, what are some of the things that you've observed going on with all of that? As I mean, obviously, we could talk about the military, but everything seems to be constricting around folks like that. No.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. The primary thing to say about all of this is that it's all in bad faith. You know that like I can. We can talk in detail about some of the civil liberties issues specifically, right? But the thing to know, and I take a legal realist perspective on a lot of things where I kind of cut to underlying stuff, but it's all in bad faith. Whether it's the Cass review or the various things with trans kids in sports, or it's all the evidence is not real.
Yeah.
The arguments are not real. It's just all in bad faith, right?
Mhm.
And the other thing that makes civil liberty specifically hard to talk about here is that you know, in a lot of ways, who cares about what the law says already, right? Everything is going to the court, and the court is just making new law. Um, so I can say, with a great amount of confidence, based on what I know, right, that uh, this a lot of the anti-trans um, legislation that we're seeing, a lot of the administrative actions that we're seeing, are contrary to the law as written. Like they just are, and there's a variety um, of reasons why. Right, some of them are structural. Right, some of them are sort of case law based. Some of them have to do with like totally unrelated things on the surface. Like I go back to this because we litigated a big case about this, but obviously a lot of trans people experience gender dysphoria. Gender dysphoria is a covered disability under the Americans with Disabilities Act. At least that's disputed, but it's not disputed where we litigated it. And that means that a lot of these things imply things like disability rights. They imply things like obviously gender rights, and you the current state of the case law is unambiguous until if you go 6 months ago, it is
Yeah.
it is unambiguous on a lot of these points that are now suddenly really ambiguous.
Right.
Following Scrimeti, it's like who knows where we are on these things, because you can read Scrimeti, you know what it says about trans rights and kids, but your best way to read it is by looking to what it means for the next case, because the current state of things just doesn't matter that much when the court is on this rampage.
So what's different exactly about what the courts are doing now versus 6+ months ago? Is there like a qualitative difference in process, or is it like a kind of I don't know. I really don't know. Can you help me?
Yeah, no, two two big things that are different with the court, right? One is just plainly they are emboldened.
Right.
They are doing things that they wouldn't have done before out of, we hear all the time, whether it's true or not, who knows, about John Roberts' institutionalism. That he wants incremental change and he wants to move slowly and he cares about respect for former cases and stuff like that.
What, did John Roberts write that?
I mean, the press accounts very much often read like John Roberts wrote them. Partially because it's now a 6-judge majority and they don't necessarily have to get Roberts, and partially because they're just all emboldened. The step-by-step erosion of rights has given way in a lot of places to just sudden erosions of rights. So there's that. And then the other thing, and people like Steve Vladeck, and for example, really know this stuff inside and out. But the shadow docket, basically the motions that go to the court, not on the merits of the case, but on injunctions and things like that. The Supreme Court has become even more aggressive than it was previously. It's been incredibly partisan. The law, I don't have the numbers on hand, but there were just some numbers around the past few days about how vastly disproportionate the court has been in terms of allowing Trump administration policies when it stopped so many Biden administration policies. They're just on a rampage. They're just, anything good that someone tries to do, they're stopping, and anything bad that someone tries to do, they're letting go through, with very few exceptions on either side.
Can you walk me through this July 14th ruling about the Department of Education? I don't know if you're familiar with that particular Supreme Court ruling.
Let me just remind myself. I know you had it in the notes.
Yeah, I don't have a lot in there, but it's just hard for me to understand in how this is permissible, right? It kind of boggles my mind. So to give a kind of overview, the Supreme Court gave the Trump administration permission to temporarily pause an order that a Massachusetts federal judge had given that would make the Department of Education reinstate a bunch of employees, 1,400, right, who are fired as a workforce reduction effort. So there's a bunch of these people. Missing them is causing a lot of slowdown and backup in terms of things like civil rights complaints in the education department. And a judge was like, obviously you cannot do that. And the Supreme Court just said, no, actually, I think it's okay. I just don't see how that makes any sense. Can you make it make sense?
So, the sort of first thing with these is that it can be very hard to follow the sort of series of pauses and stays, right? So the original ruling paused the plan. Then the Supreme Court paused the pause, allowing the plan to go forward.
Right.
Yeah.
So, that stuff can all just be very hard to track. The sort of long and short of this stuff, right, is that, not again to jump to the end, but the Supreme Court is just responsible for rulings here that are at best on a practical level ridiculous, right? Without, looking at, I don't have the language of the ruling in front of me, right? But the things that matter here are things like irreparable harm, right? Is this a fixable problem? And in the very limited sense, well, these employees, maybe they can be paid later or whatever it is, right? But the employees have work. The work has federal contracts. The federal contracts are sending people to the work site to do the work. Some of these folks work in things that you can't just ignore from day to day, whether it's research or what have you. And, any reasonable reading of the law would have the Supreme Court saying, this is a big change. Right. We got to let the process play out before we let the big change go into effect. And time again, whether it's birthright citizenship or people's jobs, they're just saying, go ahead.
Yeah.
And
Right. So here's what Linda McMahon said. She's going to be our punching bag today, I think. Secretary of Education, Linda McMahon, about this finding, she said, today the Supreme Court again confirmed the obvious. The President of the United States, as the head of the executive branch, has the ultimate authority to make decisions about staffing levels, administrative organization, and day-to-day operations of federal agencies, which to me is just not like a thing that I thought the president did. Right, like he's not the HR director of the board of the
Right.
Department of Education. Like that doesn't seem like that's his job to decide, and it doesn't seem like there's any universe in which any president, even a competent one, would have all the information that they need to make staffing decisions about every department.
Well, the underlying issue with all of these specific questions, right, is who is controlling the money, right? Who the Congress is supposed to have the power of the purse. They set the budgeting, and there's been all these questions about impoundment, which I don't know that much about, but it's functionally does the executive branch have to spend the money that the Congress allocates, right?
Yeah.
And we've just never seen anything like this. We've never seen an office holder in the executive just say, we're not going to fund entire areas of law. We're not going to fund whole agencies.
Yeah.
And the answer on these things is really obvious, right? Even if you put aside all of the merits of all of it, the answer for the court should be, these are big changes that cannot be made quickly. It takes time to litigate them. We are going to stop everything until it happens.
And again, to your point, Josh, that you actually brought up earlier, I did a little digging because, of course, that's our jobs here. Steve Vladek, 10 days ago, since April 4th, SCOTUS has issued 15 rulings on 17 emergency applications filed by Trump. 3 birthright citizenship were consolidated. Applications were consolidated. It has granted relief to Trump in all 15 rulings. It has written majority opinions in only 3. And the order of which he was speaking about, again, 9-10 days ago, was the 7th with no explanation at all. Now,
yeah, how typical is that to have just no majority opinion on a SCOTUS decision?
Yeah, so this gets to the difference between the shadow docket stuff and the merits cases, right? On these shadow docket cases, the motions, the injunctions, things like that, it is very common to not get an explanation. If you have an explanation, it is often just the dissent, and a lot of them by number, not by importance, often come down as unanimous decisions, or at least what's called a per curiam decision, which is just when the court doesn't note who says what, the court is speaking with one voice.
Right.
It is actually a little bit more out of the ordinary in my experience that you do have people writing affirmative decisions on the shadow docket, or on at least on these cases that are at the Supreme Court. I guess I shouldn't attribute them all automatically to the shadow docket, but they are things that are in front of the Supreme Court on procedural issues like these stays. As Steve often rightly points out, right, it is the failure to write on these things and changing constitutional issues functionally, changing due process rights, and just issuing an opinion. I don't remember if there was a majority in this one, but issuing an opinion essentially without explanation that changes what people's rights are on the ground when an officer comes and scoops you off the street. And to do that without even hearing the merits of the case, right, is just lawless. And whether they write or not, that's true, but it's just outrageous that there are so many of these where they don't even explain themselves. They don't even say, this is what we're thinking. The only thing we can get on many of them is parsing from the dissents backwards to what the majority is saying.
Right.
And it's just not the way that our fundamental rights should be addressed.
Well, Josh, this again, it strikes me that what you said before, and a refrain that you've had throughout this discussion so far, that none of what is being argued is really has a basis in our legal system as it currently sits, or even makes a lot of sense. In a spoken conversation, it would sound like gobbledygook if you were trying to explain it to somebody outside of Washington, D.C. court. I guess my question is a bit of an abstract one. You'll forgive me. That's one of my deals here. What how are people how are law firms, individuals who are wary of having their rights taken or stepped on, how can you compete against people who are not playing by the rules of how we usually do things? I mean, if we come to conclusions based on rational thought and rational observation, but then there's a whole nother group not making decisions based on those tenets. How do we go on, sir?
There's no good answers on this. They're just the short answer is that there are no good answers, right? I've been advising people all year, whether it's a federal employee who calls me and says, "What do I do about this 5 bullet points email that I just got?" Or someone who is at a company that they're making a big deal about their DEI policies or whatever it is, right? The answer for all of this is you're dealing with an adversary that is not playing by the rules, and it's what fascism does, right? It makes it so that the incentives in a normal rational system are just no longer applicable, right?
Yeah.
So people have choices, right? You can go out of your way to make sure that you stay out of the crosshairs. You can comply in the moment in the hope that you don't turn into a bigger problem. But as practical advice, as legal advice, there's no right answer for how to deal with an irrational system, and there's no way to fix it except to get a rational system back in place.
Cool. I love that.
I'm fun. People
Yeah.
love talking to me.
Let's talk about ice cream flavors. What's your favorite?
I like vanilla a lot. I really do.
All right.
I do.
A good vanilla
Yeah,
with the nice natural flavor.
Yes.
Yeah, like a really fancy vanilla. I really like a really fancy vanilla. Maybe like some chips or something in there. But
Yes.
I accept that. Oh, you know what? Yeah, vanilla, like chocolate chip. That's a good time.
yeah.
Yes.
Okay, my question is now about, so you talked about how you have worked with incarcerated people's civil rights complaints and things. Do you have any insight on where these concentration camp type things are, where they fit into that scheme? In what ways are they similar to a normal detention center? In what ways are they not normal? I'm thinking of CCOT, but I'm also thinking of the thing that they call Alligator Alcatraz, which is a concentration camp.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
Yeah. So, it's all bad.
Sure. Yeah.
It's all bad. So, I'm not actually sure what the idea is in terms of how Alligator Alcatraz, or whatever we're going to call it, is going to get
a real name.
is populated, or who, if that's a ICE detention facility or something there in Florida. But the sort of short version on this is that you have essentially the least rights that you have anywhere in the system, in a system that has some places with real gaps in your rights.
Right.
And the transparency is almost zero, and your rights are similarly limited. And I can talk about that for a second, about why those rights are so specifically limited. So on the pure civil rights lawyer side of this, as when you're talking about immigration detention, you were talking about federal facilities that are either manned by federal officers or private individuals on the behalf of federal officers. As long as you're dealing with a federal officer, you have very close to no rights to sue that person. FBI agent comes up to you on the street, beats the shit out of you, takes your stuff, no warrant. Very unlikely you can sue that FBI agent, period. The Supreme Court 50, 60 years ago, I don't remember, it issued an opinion, it's called Bivens, that gives you the right to sue a federal officer. Especially in the past 20 years, the court has rolled back Bivens more and more to the point now where essentially, with very, very few exceptions, people like to say, unless your last name is Bivens, you just cannot. It's very limited in the way you.
Well, sir, can I interject for a second?
Sure.
Why, over the last 20 years or so, have the courts been rolling back Bivens?
Just sort of creeping reactionaryism. Just
Okay.
there's not a principled reason. The same way
Right.
that the interpretation of qualified immunity is not based on anything but a broad bipartisan belief that you should protect cops as much as possible.
Mhm.
And so I mentioned all of that, and I mentioned Bivens because if you were going to sue an ICE agent, that would be your path for it. And if you were going to sue the person responsible for your ICE detention, because they're federal agents, that would be the path for it. It's very, very limited, right? So it is one, in fact, as a detainee, you don't have the same rights as a prisoner. You don't have the same rights. You don't have Eighth Amendment rights, for example, because you're not a prisoner. You're a detainee. You're pre-trial. You're pre-whatever it is here, right? So it is a different set of rights, and the same thing is true in your
Right.
county jails, right? Your folks that are there pre-trial have a different set of constitutional rights than your folks that are there convicted on misdemeanors, for example.
Right.
And they end up being very similar, but it's a different regime in how you get there.
Imagine being told that you're a detainee and not a prisoner, and having to be like,
It's such a nightmare.
It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. But
absolutely nuts.
All of these distinctions they're ridiculous, right?
Yeah.
You can create an intellectual basis for them if that's what you want to do, but the reality should simply be if you are in state or federal custody, if you're in the custody of the sovereign in one way or another, right, you should have a set of rights that is broadly applicable. And
Right.
it's all sliced very, very thin to make it as difficult as possible for people.
Yeah. I mean, I'm old enough to remember, just old enough, but I am old enough to remember the Iraq War era, enemy combatants designation that was used, right, to make this okay in Guantanamo Bay.
Right.
And it does really look for all the world like that's essentially, it's a semantic distinction so that we can get away with abusing human beings. And the Everglades facility, it's already up and running. It's got hundreds of people in it. They're in despicable conditions. They're crowded together. It's unsanitary. There are bugs crawling over their bodies. They're being put in stress positions and things. It's all the sort of Lindy England, Guantanamo abuses happening abroad, but also now happening in Florida, which is just didn't feel possible. And now I feel dumb for having thought that it was not possible. And now I'm mad about feeling dumb because I'm defensive about my intellect. So that's cool.
I have lost most of my faith in what can and can't happen here.
Right.
It seemed 6 months ago not that this was any solace, but that we were going to be sending people abroad for the worst of it, and it's just not at all clear that that's happening now. And it seems clear that there are at least some American citizens that will gladly do this and do it at home.
Yeah.
It was bad enough when we were sending them to other countries to be abused by autocrats there.
Right.
But that we're doing it here as well, it does feel like it breaks some kind of barrier It crosses a new line that I didn't think would get crossed, and here we are. And it does do this thing of emboldening random people, right? So we have stories coming out of like landlords and bosses threatening people's citizenship because the person upset them, right? And some of whom are American citizens going, I'm not sure you can do that, but I think maybe
it's permission structures, right? It's creating, back before Trump was elected the first time, or at least once he started in 2015, our phones at the office started ringing with reverse discrimination calls. Honest to God, I had probably had my office for 4 years or something at that point. I got a reverse discrimination call from a kook once, maybe twice a year.
That's amazing. Like, it's one thing to be mad because you think reverse discrimination happened, but to call a civil rights attorney and to be like, my civil rights are under attack. I'm being discriminated against for what? Being white?
All the time. It's being white and being a dude. And
2 strikes.
Sometimes
those guys, they can't even get into Columbia anymore. You can't be a white male.
Yeah, you can't.
And get into Columbia.
They've killed all legacy admissions, so it's just not possible. It's a lot of times it's I'm white at work and being targeted, and if it's a dude, it's sometimes I'm white, sometimes it's the women at work are targeting me, and about 20% of the time it's the family court judge is targeting me, and I want to sue the judge. That we get.
Oh my God. So it's like they're giving my bitch ex-wife too much, and I think that's discrimination.
The judge. I didn't hire a lawyer, and I showed up with all my evidence and in a trash bag. The judge wouldn't let me admit it because of discrimination and not. Yeah.
I thought this was America.
Yeah. You know what they say about a man who represents himself? It's that he's a cool guy and a hero. That's the saying,
right. I think. Who knows the system and knows if the flag has fringe or not.
Josh, well, I'd like to get back to something that we passed through upon, due process. Well, that used to be something that seemed pretty cool, didn't it? And everyone who was here had the ability to have that due process. But now all of a sudden, that's not true, apparently. And it's never been true. And I'm being told by people who I might also classify as kooks that it has never been true. And yet we've been running it like this for some decades now. What can you tell us about due process? Who should have it and why? Everyone?
Yeah. What's your answer, and why is it everyone?
The thing about this due process, these recent due process attacks, right, is that they're not even they're in a lot of ways not even about due process, right? Because the due process at issue is the due process that determines if you get due process, right? It is, do I get a chance to say to someone before I get sent to South Sudan that actually I'm a citizen? And if the answer is no, you don't ever get that chance, then it's even beyond like losing your due process, or you're losing your opportunity to it. And like the court, I guess the courts will tell you when you get to South Sudan, you can file a habeas petition in the federal court for the District of the South Sudan. Like, it doesn't make any sense, right?
Right.
As much as due process in itself is really important, the things that we're seeing now are just very basic threshold issues where no one is even going to consider if you have any rights until your rights have already been violated. Yeah. Once again, everything I say is fun.
It's all super fun. I know. Do you really you like these pregnant pauses at the end of all your statements where we just take it in, just breathe with it. Well, I've been informed by highly intelligent sources that due process is actually very unreasonable to want, because what you want everybody to take up the court's time and be doing all this paperwork and being seen by executors of the law before they have anything happen to them. Gosh, you're so unreasonable.
Unbelievable.
And it's not even giving them a hearing on the merits.
Yep.
It is looking at them and saying, do you have any right to anything, and refusing to do even that before it's too late for them to act.
Yeah, we are treating people like trash. Like, we can just throw them away. And, you know, to an extent, it's been a thing that we've done for a long time. There are certain kinds of people that it is okay to treat as though they are not really people, and that there's not something to lose when they get locked
Right.
away or sent somewhere that's dangerous for them, or in any other way deprived of their liberty, right?
Well, I think that part of this, and sir, please jump in if I say some crazy stuff, feels to me as though part of this whole discussion of how we can get rid of people's rights and freedoms, well, it's also centered around not only are some people not with the opportunity for due process or to express their sentiment, but well, being in the country is now not a civil offense anymore. Apparently, being in the country is now a crime, like a crime that we can put people in jail for. And I feel as though these two things are connected and similar because, again, when I explain to people that being in the country is not in itself a crime, that gets a lot of pushback because they think, well, then why is it called illegal immigration? And of course,
Yeah.
that's fun with language, isn't it? Because we say that, and then it creates in our minds the ability to be like, well, if it's illegal, that must be a crime, and if it's a crime just to be here, then how do they get the rights that we have?
I mean, it's so funny. Like, I've made illegal U-turns. That doesn't. I'm not in prison right now over it. Like, there's like there's things that are illegal.
It's in general, certain people do something, and it disvalues their entire life, and certain people, can do awful things, and it doesn't make a difference, right? And it is fundamentally about how we value those people.
Yeah.
And not this is why on civil rights issues, for example, right, like deferring to rights is a lot of times is a sort of losing position anyway, because rights are supposed to be the floor, and there's a lot of stuff that can happen to you before someone has violated your rights. But a thing that we've seen a lot of is, people, instead of creating policy that is, sort of good and useful, and if something goes wrong, maybe it gets down to what a right could be, creating policy that exists at the borderline between legal and violating your rights, right? Getting rid of that entire, we treat people well, and then maybe somebody treats somebody poorly, and then maybe an extraordinary case gets to the question of, did this violate your rights? And instead, we now live at that bottom level, right? Where everything is designed only to get you slightly better than your minimum rights. Right? And the entire space above that is just gone.
Yeah. I think we have a fairly human tendency to put people in categories of like good or bad, right? Where kind of what they do doesn't matter, because if you're in the good box, then you kind of are clear to do whatever you want. And if you're in the bad box, then there's truly not a way for you to pull yourself out of that box, right? It's kind of something as a parent, I'm like picking books to read to my kids. And I have noticed this in a lot of children's books, especially older ones, that they kind of train them to think this way, where like the protagonist and the antagonist kind of do the same set of actions, but it's good when the protagonist does it and it's bad when the antagonist does it. Harry Potter is a really good example of this, where like Draco Malfoy will make fun of someone for being ugly, and it's like, what a villain. And then like Harry will also make fun of someone for being ugly, and it'll be like, that little scallywag, he's such a hero, we love him, and it's not just Harry Potter though. It's like books that I have read my kids. And I do think that it's a reflection of the kind of ideology that we have, where certain types of people are just not candidates for rights in our minds. That like this floor exists because we want people to be on it, apparently.
Uh, Absolutely, and it's not out of a sense of moral superiority or anything. When I say like I don't understand it. Like I don't understand how there's people, they are human beings, and you don't see them as having at least the same
Yeah. It
fundamental
should
values.
really end there, right? That should
Yeah,
be the end of it. To be like, oh,
right.
but those are human people.
Really, I mean, very seriously. That
Yeah.
that should be the end of it, and it's not. And I just don't get it.
Yeah. We are desensitized, I think, to that kind of misery too.
Yeah.
I always notice it when people talk about homelessness in cities too, the way that they talk about human beings as if they're an eyesore or like a
Yep.
physical hazard, like exposed rebar or something. And it's like, that is a person. And
Yes.
they have needs and they have the right to have those needs met. And it's not actually acceptable to treat them like, they're a disease.
It's the dehumanizing process, and so often we correlate it to thinking of people as animals, but in very many practical ways it can be that, right? It can be as though they are some like exposed hazard on the street. I mean, living in Las Vegas during the beginning of the pandemic, there were lots of people across the city who were like petrified to be around homeless people, as though they
Yep.
were like the rats that were coming into Milan or Genoa or Venice, whatever, right? And it is not good. It is not good, and I think it, as so often all of our actions do, I think it tells us something about ourselves and about our society, and perhaps we have a way to go to become civilized, as we like to say we are. Um,
There's
I
also, growing up on the border, we have, I grew up in Arizona, and the way that people talked about immigrants, like on the news, the border, the crisis on the border, that's a framing we do not have to accept. Um, but they would talk about these people as if they were a natural disaster, like a
right.
flood or an avalanche. And then, you live among people in Arizona, and I'm listening to this like it's like a flood, it's a horde, they're like screaming towards our city, they're beheading people in Nogales or whatever. And then I'm just like, but that's my taekwondo instructor. Like I don't know what you mean. Like he taught
Right.
me all my combinations.
Right.
Yeah, no, it's this, especially in California, the deal with this most of the time, right? But just like making fun of Gavin Newsom, because what else do you do? But the
I'm for it.
uh, but I don't really think of myself as a libertarian per se, but like the closest I get is telling a human being that they don't have like the right to be somewhere, like
Yep.
where if you've decided that benefits have work requirements or home address requirements, and then you've decided that people can't sleep on the street, but you also won't build any shelters, you're just making it illegal to exist at that point.
Yeah.
And that is the point where I really I really have a libertarian side that it's at some point I don't think I realized that I had until I started thinking more
Well,
specifically about this.
It doesn't make you a libertarian to believe in rights.
Yeah, no, let me be really clear about this. I am not saying I'm a libertarian, but I do, the idea that you could just illegalize someone's existence, like I
Oh.
don't know what that is except like eliminationist.
they they did that. They tried to do that here. I'm in the capital of Illinois right now, and the city tried to do that probably 8 months ago. They put out an ordinance that called for it to be illegal to camp within city limits. And of course, we all know that everybody is constantly lining up to go camp within a city, right? So, so that obviously meant that the housing insecure and homeless of the community were being targeted. And again, silver lining in a dark time, the community came out and absolutely killed that bill, killed that ordinance. And and everyone had to walk away with their tail between their legs, because at the end of the day, you just have to say it out loud a couple of times. Who's trying to camp downtown unless you have to camp downtown?
Yeah, right.
You know, it's bullshit. It's nonsense.
What are you talking about? I just reserved my campsite in Chicago. I'm so excited.
Well, and people act like it's a force of nature, but it's a policy choice. Those people don't have to be camping outside. You can build places for them to go. You can increase housing supply. You're not even talking about shelters. You just mean that it can be affordable to live. Right. You can build shelters too. Shelters aren't right for everybody, but you can build shelters too.
You can subsidize rents. You have all kinds of options. You can, what you cannot do, or you should not be allowed to do, is make it impossible to get housing, make it illegal to camp, and then decide that it's okay to destroy somebody's things if you find them camping outside, right? Setting them back even further in their journey to being housed. Like, it's so painful. People losing their documents that they need in order to get the services that they need in order to get jobs, losing their phones because they got picked up in a raid. Like, it's out of control. Those are people.
Yeah, and the documents you mentioned are important because the programs for folks that are in those sorts of situations are very commonly the ones with the most stringent paperwork requirements. Mm-hmm. The most specific, you have to file on this day in this way. Yeah. And it's essentially a filtering mechanism. They make them difficult and make it impossible for people to comply. And then the few people that can comply, get their options to get their Section 8 housing, that then they have to fight people to take their voucher, right? But it's made difficult for people at every single step.
Right.
It's a travesty, sir, but we're grateful that you are able to chat with us and give us some insight into these types of things. Again, you've said many horrible things, but we don't hold it against you because we asked the questions.
I'm sorry.
I might a little bit. I'm a little resentful, I'll be honest.
I can I could be funny at times, but like this stuff is all
You're very good on the social media. We love you on Blue Sky.
I appreciate that. I know you invited me on maybe for jokes and instead got largely an hour of incredibly depressing stuff. But that's where
we invited you on for your expertise. Don't worry.
We're the jokes. Yeah. We're the jokes, not you, sir.
It's all really bad right now. We got to make it better.
Yeah. Well, I do want to thank you for being one of the people who sued the government on day one of Trump's administration. I think that is very smart. I think that's the kind of thing that, people with the expertise and ability to do so need to do, right? To challenge wherever challenging is possible. So in this case, I just wanted to kind of summarize what you did before we go, which the angle that you took, I think was really interesting, which is to take Doge as an entity and to challenge its legality, because there are standards that need to be set for the kind of thing that it is, which is like an advisory, what's the term for what it is?
Advisory committee.
An advisory committee, yeah.
So essentially, prior to the administration, and really still currently, if you really get down to what is Doge, there just are not good answers. We've had months and months of litigation. Honestly, I don't even remember where that litigation is at the moment.
Sure.
In terms of who is the administrator, right? And they put someone forward who was on vacation in Mexico and didn't even know about it or something. And then recently they said it was run by a troika of people. And I don't remember if they even identified who those people were. So fundamentally, right, none of it's really ever made any sense. So going into the administration, it looked pretty clear like it was one of these advisory bodies. And that operates under a certain legal regime that requires it to be fair and balanced, have people who have different perspectives it doesn't have to agree with anybody, but you gotta have meet certain requirements. Doge did not meet those requirements. Somewhat to our surprise, after we filed, they've said that Doge is not that; it's something else. To this day, it's not exactly clear what it is. It's not exactly clear who leads it. It's not exactly clear what Elon Musk's role is in it. But that's the point of the litigation.
Right. Well, thank you for that litigation. And, well, I actually did want to end this on a bit of a higher note. I wanted to try to do that, even though I think it's a bit of a mixed higher note. Well, this whole discussion is really centered around, to varying degrees, the fact that the powers of the executive seem to be being expanded and attempted to be expanded to places that we are not hitherto familiar with. Well, a lot of these actions might be perceived as coming from people who do not think that they will have to give power over to other people at some point. I'd love to ask your thoughts on that, but really the more pressing question is, how does the government look if a Democrat and liberals in Congress have power again? Does everything shrink back to how we've known it, or can we not put the genie back into the bottle? And what might that look like? From a liberal perspective.
Yeah. So right now we have these sort of expansive executive that's just getting bigger and bigger, and we're rolling back due process rights, which is what controls the executive. I'm not 100% sure if it's fair to call it monarchist yet, but it's got to be close. If we are in a situation, I don't think there aren't going to be midterms or something, right? But
sure,
it is very hard to imagine a situation in 2028, given what's happening right now. If the 2028 election happened today, it would just be very hard to imagine Trump handing power off to anybody. But looking forward, a lot of things change between now and then. Under a presumption of normal procedures, if Democrats take power, I think people will be somewhat disappointed in the rollbacks, right? Because there is a perspective on this that's conservative and liberal, and that's fine. But there is also a perspective where the sovereign takes power and keeps it, and once in a lot of ways, a lot of the reasons that we are in the current circumstance that we're in is that former Democratic administrations wouldn't roll things back, right? Whether it's Patriot Act, NSA, wiretapping,
right.
Things that expand the power of the government, it's very hard to then take those back to the people. And I don't have a lot of confidence that when a different government comes in, that those things, put aside your ideological basis for them, power that has accrued up to the sovereign just does not go backwards easily, and I don't expect that it will.
Right.
Yeah, that's reasonable. Trent, you said this was going to be a lighthearted ending,
You did
and I
say
feel I was sold a bill of goods. I feel I've been scammed. I feel I'm
learning from the country, Caitlin. I'm learning from the country. You got to throw him a curveball. You thought it was going to be good. Turns out
that was a real Trump steak of a question right there.
curled up at the edges of the plate. Yes.
You tried. You tried.
Yeah, you did try.
I tried. But Josh Erlich, he is a formidable guest, and we'll have jokes, we'll have laughs, but we'll also get to a lot of really important stuff. And really, we appreciate you taking the time to come on and chat with us and educate us. Yes, Caitlin?
Oh, I don't know. I think. I'm happy that we've now doubled our number of lawyers that we've talked to. That's very exciting. We had Clay Jackson on, and now we have you.
Yes.
So I'm
Well-
I'm thrilled to say it now with 2 times as many lawyers. That's half
Well,
the answer.
it was a pleasure. It was a pleasure to be here, and anytime you'll need me to jump in and make sure no one's in too good of a mood,
Yeah.
I could do that.
Oh, you'll be back.
We're gonna have the ice cream flavors episode soon, where
That's
we
perfect.
we talk about ice cream. We talk about. I keep threatening to do a whole episode where I just make Trent watch clips of Back to the Future. It's an option, okay? If we really start to lose it, it's gonna be the Back to the Future episode.
Well, we appreciate you so much,
Absolutely. It was a pleasure to be here, guys.
This has been great. My spirits are so lifted. I'm full of hope for the future. I've got so many ideas for ways to celebrate our glorious path forward.
You know, I can. There is something hopeful I can actually say. I don't know. Yeah, let me go back. Let me give you something actually hopeful. The one thing that I don't think people are seeing enough, right, is that the way that this administration has changed the government means that the government can be changed in this way, right? And there is as much opportunity as there is anything else. To get it, we have to have a political structure that wants to actually fight fascism and seize the power, and has the creativity to do something interesting. But if we did have that, the thing that we've learned is that the government is not the only way that the government can be. We can make drastic changes by just going and making the changes. We've already seen it.
Okay, one big beautiful bill, but for housing and food and medicine and education.
for good things.
Sounds good.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. What if we took all the money that we're using on immigration enforcement and we moved it over to things that people actually want and need? That sounds really good.
Yeah, we'll call it the New Deal, and it'll be different.
One big beautiful New Deal. That sounds great.
It's perfect. It rolls off the tongue.
It sure does. OBBND.
Oh yeah.
Okay, that is hopeful. Thank you. Thank you for pulling us out of the pit of despair.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure, guys.
It was so great to talk to you. Thank you. And this has been Half the Answer, where understanding a question is half the answer. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you, Josh. We will see you later.
Thanks for listening to Half the Answer, presented by Liberal Currents. You can find Half the Answer anywhere you get your podcasts. Liberal Currents is an entirely listener and subscriber-funded publication, which includes programs like Half the Answer and Neon Liberalism. So, if you like what you've heard and wish to contribute, you may do so at liberalcurrents.com and through Patreon. And remember, understanding a question is half the answer.